Montana Territory, August 1878. The sun beat hard on the ramshackle town of Dry Creek, dust curling along the wooden planks of the auction platform in front of the general store. A crowd had gathered, mostly men with sun-split hands and wind-worn faces, their eyes scanning the row of women standing silent and still along the platform. At the very end stood a woman who did not lower her gaze like the others. She held her chin up, her eyes steady, though her hands were clenched tight at her sides. She wore a faded blue dress, the hem patched, her dark brown hair pinned up with care. There were lines around her mouth earned, not given, and her name was Selma Carter. She was 34, and today she was being sold. Too old for childbearing, someone muttered. Pretty enough, but past her prime, another said. Selma heard it. She did not flinch. Her husband had died 2 winters ago in Kansas, leaving her with 2 children and no land to stand on. She had tried, Lord, she had tried to keep them fed, to keep them safe. But sickness came through the town, and her son and daughter, Colin and Clara, had been taken to an orphanage when Selma collapsed from fever. By the time she recovered, they were gone. No one could tell her where. She had come north, working where she could, always searching. When her money ran dry, she was told she could work off her debts as a domestic, but the contract came with a sale tag and a public auction. Next up, Selma Carter, 34, strong, knows how to cook, sew, and isn't scared of hard work, the auctioneer called, voice loud and sharp. The crowd shifted, startin' at $15. Who'll take her? A long silence, then a voice from the crowd, young, amused. How about 5? Seeing as she's past the age. Laughter. Selma stared straight ahead. $5. Do I hear 6? 6. Another man called out. 7. 8. Still too old, someone shouted. The auctioneer's eyes were already moving past her. All right, move in on 25, a deep voice said. Silence dropped heavy. All heads turned. A tall cowboy stood at the edge of the crowd, coat dusty, wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. He had a straight back, a calm stillness. His boots were worn but well kept. He stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. $25. For her. The auctioneer blinked. Sold. Selma did not look at the man until he stepped up and gently offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, sure. My name is Prescott Hale, he said. I have a ranch about 10 miles west. I could use help. If you are willing. She nodded once. I am. They rode in silence most of the way. His horse pulled a small wagon behind it, and he let her sit in the back, offering a canteen of water without trying to talk too much. The way he glanced over his shoulder now and then checking if she was all right was the quietest kindness she had known in months. The land turned golden as they traveled west, the sun dipping low. His ranch was modest but clean. A 2-room cabin, a barn, and a few fenced acres with cattle dotting the fields. He helped her down from the wagon. You can have the back room, he said, and I will not expect anything beyond what you want to offer. I did not buy you to own you. I needed help. You looked like someone who could handle herself. Selma studied him. And you do not mind that I am too old? Prescott rubbed the back of his neck. You looked just right to me. Her breath caught. He turned and walked toward the barn without another word. That night, she lay awake on a soft bed, the window open to the cool night air, and thought about how he had looked at her when he said it. Not with pity, not with desire, with something steadier. The next morning, she rose before dawn. She made coffee, found flour and lard, and baked biscuits while he was out checking the fence line. She was folding laundry when he walked in, shirt damp with sweat, hair sticking to his forehead. You did not have to do all this, he said. I wanted to. He paused, then nodded. Thank you. Over the next week, something shifted. He showed her how to feed the cattle, how the pump worked. She mended his shirts, careful not to overstep. They moved around each other like two wary animals learning a new rhythm. One night, she found him sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. She stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee. He took his with a nod. "You been quiet," he said. "I lost my children," she said softly. 2 years ago, taken when I was sick. I do not know where they are." He looked at her then, his jaw tight. "What were their names?" "Colin and Clara." He nodded. "I will help you find them." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast. "Why?" she asked. He looked down at his coffee. "Because no one should be alone in this world if they do not choose to be." They sat side by side in silence. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something begin to ease in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close. The next morning, she found a small wooden box on her bed. Inside were 2 little carved animals, a horse and a rabbit. "They reminded me of the names you said," Prescott said from the doorway. "Something for your shelf." She touched them gently. "Thank you," she said. He gave a quiet nod and stepped away. But her hands were trembling, because for the first time in 2 years, someone had seen her. Not as a burden, not as used up, just as she was. And that did something to her she did not have a name for yet. The late summer wind moved through the cottonwoods behind the barn, carrying the thick scent of sage and sun-dried hay. Selma stood at the washbasin behind the cabin, sleeves rolled past her elbows, scrubbing Prescott's bandana clean. Her hands moved with a steadiness that came from years of tending to others, though something about this place made the work feel different, less like obligation, more like choosing. Prescott had been gone since dawn, taking a bay gelding up into the hills to check on a calving cow that hadn't come down with the rest. He'd said he wouldn't be long, but the sun had already begun to dip, and the shadows stretched tall across the pasture. She dried her hands, hung the cloth on the line, and turned toward the corral just as hoofbeats broke the quiet. He rode in slow, one arm cradling a cloth bundle against his side. The horse's flank was dark with sweat. Prescott dismounted stiffly and glanced toward her, his mouth drawn tight. Found a pup half starved up in the rocks. Thought maybe he'd take to barn life, if he makes it through the night. She stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Let me see." He opened the bundle carefully. A scrawny cattle dog pup blinked up from within, ribs showing, one ear chewed ragged. Selma reached out, her fingers brushing its matted fur, and something in the way Prescott watched her made her pause. "He's not pretty," he said. "Neither's a winter storm, but it still matters." Prescott gave a low breath, almost a laugh. "Didn't figure you for soft-hearted. You'd be wrong." She lifted the pup into her arms. It was barely warm. "You got any old milk?" He nodded toward the barn. "Might be some left from the morning's pull." They moved into the barn together, the air inside cool and sweet with hay. She found a feed tin, rinsed it clean, and poured in half a dipper of milk. The pup slurped weakly. Prescott leaned against the stall door, arms crossed, watching her with an unreadable look. "You were married," he said, not as a question. She didn't look up. "I was." "What was he like?" Selma set the tin down and sat on a rough bench. The pup curled against her skirt. "He was good with tools. Built our house with his own hands. But he never learned how to talk when something hurt. Just went quiet. Thought pain was something you buried." Prescott didn't speak right away. Then, "I used to think that too." She looked over at him. "Used to?" He pushed off the stall, crossed to where she sat, and lowered himself beside her. "My older brother fought for the Union. Came back with a limp and a silence that never left. He didn't last long. I figured if I stayed quiet too, maybe I'd last longer." Her voice was low. And did it work? No, they sat together, the sounds of cattle shifting outside and the pup's soft breathing between them. The moment was gentle, but it held weight, like something had shifted in the ground beneath them. I want to find them, she said after a while, eyes on the pup. My children, even if they don't remember me, even if they've been renamed or sent far. I just want to know they're safe. He nodded once. I asked around town today. There's a man who drives supplies down to Fort Shaw every fortnight. Said he heard about a sister-run orphanage in Helena that took in a boy and girl from Kansas last year. Said the girl had a limp. Her breath caught. She turned to him, eyes wide. Clara's right leg never healed straight. After the fever. I thought as much. She pressed a hand to her mouth, and for a moment, the barn blurred around her. Helena's 2 days by wagon, she said when she could speak. I'll take you. We'll leave after the next rain. Best to travel when the dust settles. She looked at him then, really looked. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his hands stayed loose even when he was saying something hard. She reached out and laid her hand on his. Why are you doing this? He didn't pull away. Because you're not just helping me. You're part of this place now. You're part of my life. They sat like that until the sky outside turned violet and the crickets began to sing. When they rose, they did it together. That night, she laid the pup beside the stove on a folded feed sack. As she straightened up, she found Prescott leaning in the doorway. Selma, she turned. He held her gaze steady. You're not too old. You're just strong enough to know what matters. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Instead, she stepped forward, not rushed, not unsure, and placed her hand on his chest. His heartbeat was solid beneath her palm. They didn't speak again that night, but something between them settled quiet and real as the stars outside. The rain came hard the following afternoon, drumming steady on the sod roof while wind tugged at the shutters. Prescott had patched the wagon's axle that morning, his hands slick with grease, while Selma packed bread and dried venison into a cloth sack and rolled 2 blankets tight for the road. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence wasn't strained. It held purpose. When the worst of the storm passed, they stepped outside together. The land smelled of wet earth and pine. The horses snorted in the corral, restless but unharmed. Prescott adjusted his hat, eyes scanning the horizon where the last of the clouds dragged their heels across the hills. We'll leave at first light, he said, testing the wagon's wheels with one boot. If we make good time, we'll sleep just past the Gallatin crossing. Selma stood beside him, her apron damp at the hem. I've never been west of Bozeman. He glanced over. You'll see plenty of it now. Helena's a long stretch from here. Are you sure you want to do this? I've never been more certain of anything. She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded and turned toward the cabin. Inside, she gathered her shawl from the hook by the door. The pup, stronger now, lifted its head from beneath the stove and let out a small whine. She knelt beside it, brushing a hand over its back. You'll stay with the neighbor's boy, Prescott said from behind her. He comes by for eggs. He can water the cattle while we're gone. Selma rose, folding her shawl over one arm. You've already thought of everything. You've had enough surprises, he said. I figured you could use something steady for once. They left before dawn, lantern light flickering across the packed dirt as they loaded the wagon. A canvas tarp stretched over the back, tied tight against the damp. Selma took the seat beside Prescott, her bag tucked at her feet, hands folded firm in her lap. The land rolled out in shades of gold and green, the storm-washed sky pale behind the mountains. They passed a stretch of burned-out trees, black trunks reaching like ribs toward the sky. Prescott spoke first after an hour of quiet. That fire came through last spring, took half the valley. Some folks never came back. Did you ever think of leaving? He shook his head. The land lost things, but it gave me back something else. Selma looked down at her hands. You never say much about what you want. I don't need much, he said, but I want something that stays. The road narrowed between two ridges as the sun climbed. They stopped at midday to rest the horses, and Selma unwrapped the bread. She passed half to Prescott, who leaned back against the wheel hub, chewing slowly. I used to wonder what it'd feel like, she said, to go somewhere with someone who wasn't trying to possess me. Just walk beside me, because they wanted to. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, You're not walking behind me, Selma. You're not walking in front. You're right where I want you. She sat beside him, close enough their arms touched. The warmth between them was quiet, but it filled the space like breath. That night, they made camp near the river, the water running cold and fast over smooth stones. Prescott lit a fire with practiced hands, and Selma laid their blankets beside it, arranging them without a word. After they ate, she stared into the flames, her voice low. Clara was afraid of thunder. She used to crawl into my bed during storms with her cold feet and pretend not to be scared. Prescott added a log to the fire. And Colin? He always pretended to be braver than he was. Made her laugh by drawing faces on the window with his sleeve. She reached into her bag and pulled out the two small carvings Prescott had given her, the rabbit and the horse, and set them gently near the firelight. I want them to see these someday, she said, so they'll know I never stopped looking. Prescott leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. They'll see more than that. They'll see how far their mother came for them. She turned to him, her eyes dark with something deeper than sorrow resolve. I don't know what we'll find in Helena. I don't know if they'll even remember me. They will, he said simply. And if they don't, we'll remind them. The fire cracked. Somewhere nearby, an owl called once and fell silent. Selma reached out and placed her hand over his. He didn't move, didn't speak, just turned his palm to meet hers. She didn't pull away. And when they lay down that night, they did so beneath the same blanket, not out of need or fear, but because the space between them no longer asked to be kept. They reached Helena by the second dusk, the city rising from the hills in soft amber tones, its brick buildings close together, smoke curling from chimneys as twilight gathered. The streets were busy with freighters and shopkeepers, and the scent of coal mingled with the sweetness of late summer berries laid out on vendor carts. Prescott guided the wagon along the main thoroughfare with quiet ease, his shoulders squared, reins loose in his hands. Selma sat beside him, her back straight, eyes scanning every face they passed. Her pulse beat hard in her throat, but she kept silent. She tied her hair back that morning with a strip of calico, and the wind had teased a few strands loose across her cheek. She didn't brush them away. They stopped in front of a red stone church tucked between two boarding houses. A woman in a plain gray dress stood on the steps, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, a bucket of water resting at her feet. Prescott tipped his hat. "Evenin', ma'am. We're looking for the orphanage that's run from here." She studied them both, then nodded toward the side gate. "Sister Agatha keeps the records. She'll be in the office behind the garden." Selma stepped down before Prescott could offer a hand. Her boots hit the dirt with purpose. The garden was modest rows of beans, cabbages, a few sunflowers bent under their own weight. Past the gate, a small building stood, its windows lit dimly from within. A bell above the door jingled when Selma pushed it open. A nun with silver hair looked up from a ledger. She wore wire frame spectacles and had an ink stain on the side of her hand. Selma spoke without hesitation. "I'm looking for two children, Clara and Colin Carter, taken from Kansas 2 years ago. My name is Selma Carter. I'm their mother." The woman studied her a long moment, then rose and crossed to a tall cabinet, pulling open a drawer. Her fingers moved over the files with practiced care. "We had a pair come through last spring," she said at last. Girl walked with a cane. Boy kept to himself. Selma's breath caught sharp, but she didn't speak. They were placed with a family near Deer Lodge. Couple with no children of their own. Took both together. Did they change their names? Selma's voice trembled, but she held it steady. They go by Weston now. The family's name. Prescott stepped forward. Where exactly are they? The nun turned, opened another drawer, and pulled out a folded page. Farm sits 5 miles south of town. The father's name is Edwin Weston. Selma reached out and took the paper. Her hands didn't shake. Thank you. They left before the sun had fully risen the next day, following a narrow track that curved through pine and open pasture. Selma didn't speak, didn't eat the bread Prescott handed her mid-morning. She only watched the land pass by, as if willing it to give her back what it had taken. Near midday, they reached a split-rail fence and a house tucked against a rise. Chickens scattered near the porch. A man with a weathered face and suspenders stepped out, a hammer in one hand. His eyes narrowed as the wagon stopped. Prescott climbed down first. We were told this is the Weston place. That's right. Selma stepped beside him. I'm looking for my children, Clara and Colin Carter. They were placed with you. The man didn't answer right away. He looked past her toward the barn. They're out back, mending a gate with my wife. Selma didn't wait. She crossed the yard, skirts brushing the tops of the grass, boots sinking into the soft soil. Prescott followed at a distance. Behind the barn, a woman with a braid down her back was showing a young girl how to loop wire around the post. A boy stood nearby holding a mallet. Selma stopped. The girl turned first. Her hair was longer now, but her eyes were the same deep brown. Her thin frame had filled out some. She still favored her right side, the leg stiff. The boy looked up, then froze. Selma didn't cry. She didn't call out. She knelt. It's me, she said. It's your mama. Neither child moved at first. Then Clara's cane dropped into the grass, and she ran, awkwardly, arms flung wide. Colin followed, faster. They collided into her, and Selma wrapped her arms around them both, burying her face in their hair. Prescott stood back, one hand on the fence, watching. Edwin Weston stepped up beside him. She their real mother? She is. The man nodded once. They're good kids. Didn't know what happened to her. She came a long way. The man scratched his jaw. We wouldn't keep them from her. If they want to go. Selma stayed a long while on the ground with her children curled into her. When she stood, she held their hands in hers. I came to take you home. If you want to come. Clara nodded, eyes wet. Colin gripped tighter. The Westons didn't argue. They packed what few belongings the children had: 2 quilts, a wooden horse, a tin box of letters. Selma thanked them quietly, and they nodded with something like respect in their eyes. The ride back to Helena was slow. Clara sat between Selma and Prescott, leaning against her mother's side. Colin rode in the back, watching the trees pass with a quiet stillness that wasn't fear, but something older. That night, they took 2 rooms at a boarding house. Prescott offered to sleep in the stable, but Selma stopped him at the door. They're with me now, she said. And so are you. He didn't answer. He only reached for her hand and held it there, between them, until the silence hummed with something sure. In the morning, they would head home, the 4 of them, together. The wagon rolled back onto Prescott's land beneath a sky brushed soft with early autumn, the light thinner now, but warm all the same. The air smelled of dry grass and pine bark, and Clara dozed against Selma's side, her head tucked into the curve of her mother's shoulder. Colin rode up front beside Prescott, holding the reins steady with careful, concentrated hands. They'd crossed 5 rivers and 2 mountain passes in those last days of travel. Clara's limp slowed them. None. Prescott had fashioned a walking stick from a pine branch and carved her name into the handle. She'd taken to it without complaint. Selma had watched her daughter's chin lift a little higher each day, her son's shoulders square out with a quiet steadiness that hadn't been there before. When the cabin came into view, the boy let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. "Looks smaller than I pictured," he said. Prescott handed him the reins. "That just means it's easier to keep warm come winter." Selma rested her hand on Clara's back. The girl stirred and blinked up at her, then smiled through sleep-heavy eyes. The sun dipped lower as they unloaded. Selma showed Clara the back room, where she'd once slept alone. Now it held a second cot, a woven rug laid down by Prescott before they'd left. Clara ran her fingers over the stitching. "He made this." Selma nodded. "He did." Out in the yard, Colin helped Prescott haul water from the well, rolling up his sleeves without being asked. When Prescott handed him the full bucket, the boy grinned. "You always let folks do things for themselves?" "Only if they're ready for it." "I am." That night, Selma ladled stew into 4 bowls, her hands steady as she passed them out. They ate at the table together, the fire popping low in the hearth. Prescott said little, but his eyes flicked often to Selma, then to the children. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct. He let the space fill with them. After the dishes were washed and the children settled in the back room, Selma stepped out onto the porch. The moon hung high, casting silver light across the pasture. Prescott stood near the fence, arms resting on the top rail, looking out toward the hills. She joined him, folding her arms beneath her shawl. "They're not afraid," she said. "No, they're not." Selma looked over at him. "You made this place into something solid. I didn't know what that was anymore." He didn't turn. "You helped it become that." "I've never had anything last," she said. "Not since before they were born. I've always waited for the next thing to fall apart." "I know." She studied his face, the slope of his jaw, the quiet tension he always carried in his shoulders less now than before. "But this doesn't feel like it's about to break. It feels like it's held together with something stronger than luck." He turned toward her. "It is." The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't empty. "I don't know what to promise you," she said, voice low. "Except I'll keep showing up. I'll keep building." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing the side of her wrist. "That's all I've ever wanted." She stepped closer, her hand still in his. The porch boards creaked beneath them, the night air cool but not cold. "I was afraid to ask you," she said. "Afraid if I said it out loud, I'd lose it. But I want to stay. If you'll have me." He lifted her hand, pressed it gently to his chest. "You're already here. You and the children. I want to build something with you, not just hold on to what's already been made." She leaned into him then, her head resting just beneath his chin, his arms circling her without hesitation. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, and she breathed in the scent of smoke and pine and warmth. He tilted his head down. "Selma, I'm yours if you'll be mine." She lifted her face and kissed him, slow and certain, the way a door opens and never shuts again. They married in late October, just before the cold set in. The neighbor's wife stitched Selma a dress from wool dyed with sumac berries, and Clara carried wild asters in her hands. Colin stood tall beside Prescott, a carved pin on his collar shaped like a star. They exchanged vows beneath the cottonwoods, the sun weaving gold through the leaves. No preacher, just the 4 of them and the land and the wind. That winter, the cabin filled with small sounds, Clara humming as she mended her quilt, Colin reading aloud by firelight, Prescott sharpening tools with Selma leaning against the doorframe, her hands wrapped around a mug of chicory. No one raised their voice. No one left the table with anger in their chest. By spring, Prescott had begun building a second room for the children. Colin helped dig the post holes. Clara collected stones for the hearth. Selma kept the ledger, counted seed, and wrote letters west to find the birth records for her children, now officially hers again by law. Sometimes, when the sky turned soft before dusk, Selma would stand in the doorway and watch her husband move through the pasture, his figure steady against the land. And he would look back, always, and meet her eyes as if to say, still here, still choosing this. And she would nod, her heart full and steady, because she knew so was she. They grew old together in that place. And nothing ever came to take it from them again.